What aspects of human nature would you say are well understood by negotiators, but less apparent to the general public?
If you're talking about hostage and kidnap and crisis negotiators, rather than the dry academic sort, is that the former negotiator understands that you cannot separate the person from the problem. Trying to rationalize or looking at something objectively to get a deal over the line is at the end of a process rather than at the beginning. And the best negotiators, they understand that there's only one thing that drives our decision making, and that's emotion. And the best negotiators, they understand or have an ability to identify, manage, and if need be, mitigate both their own and other people's emotions.
Fascinating. So how did you take me through your backstory? How did you, I mean, I know that you were a part of Scotland Yard for what, 15 years?
Yeah, 16 years, yeah.
16, that's incredible. So was your initial intent to be a negotiator, a hostage negotiator? Like walk me through this journey.
Yeah, it's one of those careers that you don't set out to do necessarily, or at least not initially. And most people who did it was their second or third career or time about. And I always wanted to be a cop. I was a detective, as I said, for 16 years, and I loved every day. I just had the best career. And then in the last 5 years or so, I bumped into a friend in the canteen at the police station, and I'd been promoted a couple of times at this point. And the only danger I was in was getting paper cuts from all the crime reports, or, a sore backside from sitting down behind a desk all day. And I was sitting having a coffee with him, and he was telling me about the last 3 or 4 days he'd just spent in something called the Red Centre, helping to resolve a kidnap negotiation to secure the release of a teenager. And I was mesmerised. I'm thinking, that sounds far more interesting than all the crime reports I've got to manage. And he offered to put me in touch with a department who oversaw the deployment and the training of those negotiators. And I made the call, and the kind of rest is history. And then I spent about 5 years in the police doing that, primarily around the kidnap aspect, less so about the suicide prevention or the crisis intervention or the bank robbery goes wrong, which is very few and far between in reality, despite what people see on the movies. So my time was spent really getting involved, getting alongside the families of people who've been kidnapped in London and working with them to negotiate the release of their loved ones back.
Wow. How common is kidnapping?
At the time in London, there was about one a week.
One a week?
There's obviously going to be more that weren't reported, because sometimes the bad guys just look after themselves and they resolve it. Because usually it was bad on bad. Somebody had shown a lack of respect or hadn't paid a drug debt. So the bad guys would then kidnap a family member of the person who owed them money, for example. But worldwide, we just don't know. There could be 40, 45,000 kidnappings a year. But if you think about it, the places where these kidnappings take place, they want to invest or get investment and tourism and business development. So they're not going to come out with the accurate figures. But we estimate tens and tens of thousands a year.
Wow. And who's among, I guess, the civilians, right? Like, who is most likely to be kidnapped?
Yeah, this is it. Whenever I speak to people, they think, well, I'm going on holiday here. Am I likely to get bundled into the back of a car? Sometimes you're in the wrong place at the wrong time. However, I'd say 90% of the time, you're more likely to be a victim of crime, of street robbery, as a tourist, say, or business traveller. And most kidnappings are targeted. They've normally done the homework. They normally understand, okay, what are Max's movements? What time does he leave the house? What time does he go to work? When does he go to the shops, pick up kids, etc.? And then they'll strike. Because you think about it, if you want to kidnap somebody, hold them, and then have weeks or months where you're negotiating a ransom, that requires a bit of logistical preparation. And so they're not just going to do it on the back of a fag packet and just wing it kind of thing. They're going to plan it. They're going to prepare it, and usually it will be local nationals that get taken, generally speaking. But occasionally there's somebody, a business traveler, or it could be a group of foreign expat workers somewhere that they'll be in the line of sight.
Wow. And is it always money related?
Yes, 99.9% of the time. Occasionally there'll be some kind of tribal dispute, or actually we want this building project or this water sanitation project moved here, some countries in the world. But by and large, they just want hard cash, US dollars, in a bag somewhere at a drop-off location, old school as it comes.
Wow. That's crazy. Are you a big, what's your stance on self-defense? Like, do you think that we should all generally be, able to defend ourselves, armed even? Like, what's your perspective on that?
Yeah, well, if somebody's going to break into your house, that is not the time to negotiate and try and bring about some kind of cooperation or collaboration. That is a time where you're gonna kick some ass if you need to stop that person breaking into your house.
Yeah.
And if someone's trying to kidnap you, trying to bundle you into the back of a van or off a ship, so you negotiated with pirates as well, who had taken some crew members off the ship. Yeah, you're going to defend yourself. But don't forget, from a kidnapping perspective, kidnappers are just businessmen who are looking to get the best deal. And they will, generally speaking, look after the hostages. A professional kidnapping gang will look after the hostages pretty well. I mean, it won't be the Ritz-Carlton, but they're not going to harm you, because they know the more they harm you or the more they hold on to you, the more chances you could get ill or injured, and then they're going to get less money. Because we're obviously going to be wanting regular proofs of life to make sure that the hostages are alive and well, and we're not going to pay for a corpse or if they threaten or harm the hostages.
Do kidnappers generally want to harm the hostages, or do they want money more?
Yeah, the savvy ones, the switched on ones, the professional gangs who do it, and it is a business, they will look after them because they know they want their payday. And like any good business, what's the kind of ideal client? It's the repeat business. It's the referral. And there've been times where I've come across the same kidnapping gang 2 or 3 times in West Africa, for example. But I know, because I've worked with them before, that actually they're gonna trust what we say, that we can trust them. They're gonna hand over the hostages. They're gonna come out initially for some obscene demand, some ransom amount, and we're going to pay nowhere near that for various reasons, which I can go into. And then everybody's going to be able to walk away thinking, do you know what, we've got something from this.
Do you always end up paying something, right?
Yeah.
It's just not necessarily what they're demanding.
I've never ever paid the initial demand, and that applies to, you could apply that to life. If you pay. So, Max, you're kidnapped and there's $1 million ransom. I don't know if that's a good, accurate reflection or value. I don't know.
I don't know. It depends who you ask, I guess.
So, and your family and friends can club $1 million together really quickly. And they say, okay, Scott, here we go. We've got this money together. We're ordering you, Scott, to on our behalf to pay this money. And I would go, well, you can look for another negotiator then, because I'm not going to do that. And why do you think I might want to push back on paying the initial demand too soon? Because,
well, that validates the criminality, right?
Yeah, but paying validates it, and then we can come on to the ethical, moral standpoint of that in a moment. But like in any kind of negotiation, any kind of deal, if I pay too much too soon, the other side are going to think, well, that was easy.
Oh, yeah.
And if you think there is money left on the table, you're going to hold out for it. And if you think you've left money on the table, you're going to be an unhappy bunny. And do you know what? I'm going to kidnap you next week. And if I can't get you, I'm going to get your kids. And if I can't get your kids, I'm going to get somebody that you care about.
Wow.
And so that's the reason why we don't pay what they demand. And again, people can apply that to their day-to-day life. If you, both sides need to feel as if they can walk away thinking they've got a good deal. Doesn't mean you condone, you acquiesce, you agree with whatever their viewpoint or standpoint is. But you've got to know, actually, if I try and coerce them and go, you know what, I'm right, you're wrong, and I'm going to beat you into the ground metaphorically on this deal. Yeah, you can play hardball, you'll get 1 or 2 deals over the line, but no one will do business with you again. Nobody will want to be your friend. Nobody will want to have a conversation with you. Nobody will want to negotiate a deal with you if you build up that reputation and you can't be trusted to do what's right.
Yeah. So would you say starting with like a lowball figure, is that kind of like the ideal strategy?
Yeah. So the initial demand would come in, and I'd sit down with a family or with the company, if it's a company running the negotiation.
Like say my kidnappers won $1 million. My family is able somehow to scrape together $1 million. What would you start at?
Well, the first thing is, it's okay, what are you willing and able to pay? And for a lot of people, they can't pay the initial demand because the initial demand is deliberately astronomically high. And the kidnappers know they're not going to get it. And so we need to work out where we're going to end up. What's our settlement figure, target settlement figure, a TSF? And say we're going to agree, do you know what, we'll pay $250,000 for you. Again, if we just, there you go, there's your 250,000 kidnappers. I'll go, oh, okay. But we're not going to release Max because we haven't had to work for it. We haven't. This is going on all subconsciously, by the way. You know what's that? You feel as if you've had to work for something. If you've earned it, you're more likely to agree and settle with it. It's like any kind of negotiation, with unions or there's a strike action going on. If the company and the unions just sat down and went, what do you want? You want 50,000 pay rise? Okay, well, we'll give you 30. Yeah, okay, deal within an hour. Both sides are going to walk away thinking, something doesn't quite feel right here. And so you have to, unfortunately, you go through a dance that you can't get out of. It's this games we play as human beings and interact as it's not necessarily tit for tat or quid pro quo necessarily, but this is the way it works. And so we're going to settle at 250,000. So we may start off with 100,000. And what's going to happen is the kidnappers are going to go apoplectic. They're going to threaten you. They're going to put you on the phone, probably put a gun to your head, make all sorts of obscene threats, maybe even do the worst thing of all, which is go silent. And you won't hear from them for days or weeks. Usually followed by a threat would happen and then they'll go silent. And that's not good for the stress levels for anybody. No. Even though and what I'll do is to earn or to demonstrate my credibility with the family early on, I would say, I've got 30 seconds. I walk into the room and they're like, who are you? Okay, you may be the cavalry, but why should we trust you? And so I've got to be able to establish that credibility within 30 seconds. And what I usually do is, my name's Scott, and this is how it's likely to play out. We're going to get a call. They'll probably put your loved one on the phone for about 5-10 seconds. So there'll be a bit of a proof of life. And they're going to make a demand for money. And it's going to be a relatively short time frame they want it by. And then if we can, we're going to agree that time when we're going to speak to them next. And that is, it's going to be very straightforward. But then this is likely to go on, depending on where we were in the world, this is likely to go for maybe 4, 5, 6 weeks or 3, 4, 5 months. And along the way, this is what the kidnappers are going to do. They're going to threaten. They're going to exaggerate the conditions, how poorly they are that the hostages are living in, and you're at the health of the hostage, or that they're being injured, or that they've been shot in an escape attempt, this is what's going to happen. But eventually, they're going to come down, and this is where we're going to settle. So almost give a presentation almost, when the first time I meet the family or the company. And then as invariably it pans out like that, each step of the way you're just validating and your credibility, your trustworthiness. That said, it still is imperative that when you enter in any negotiation, you don't go, I've got it, I know how this works. You've got to approach it with a beginner's mind, always asking those really difficult questions of what am I not seeing here? What am I missing? What can't I see? And I'd encourage a bit of red teaming, where you get people to play devil's advocate. What could really go wrong here? What could get in the way of this deal? We're going to sell at 250. We're going to go in 100,000 for Max. Okay, what are the likely challenges, obstacles, issues, threats, problems we're likely to encounter at that point? But that's all part of the preparation. So what I always say to people is, before you even have that first call, time spent in preparation is seldom wasted. I call it the bunch of fives. The palm of your hand. What are the top 5 issues, threats, problems, challenges that you're likely to face? Get ahead of the game and work them out beforehand.
Yeah, I mean, that makes perfect sense. Like, you'd have to be an idiot to pass up $100,000. I mean, that's still a lot of money. That might not be exactly what was initially hoped for, but that's still like a significant sum of cash. So interesting. Is there a case that stands out in your mind as being a pinnacle moment in your career, like a big win?
Yeah, there's quite a few, and they all seem to merge into one looking back over 15 years. But there's one that stands out. It almost had everything in it, really. And I was 1,000 miles away from home in a windowless room, and sat at a wooden table like this one, a bit longer and a bit wider. And all you could hear is the AC in the background, the generator, that low hum. And there's this really awkward silence sat around the room. Some executives from the company, a few government officials, because a week earlier, 6 people had been taken off a ship by pirates.
Wow, pirates.
But we hadn't heard anything. And I'm thinking, they should have called by now. And I'd gone in there, done my credibility pitch, set the scene out, and it wasn't necessarily going according to plan. And I have to say, in pretty much every single case I was involved in, it never went according to plan, just like life, really. And so in the middle of the table, there's an old Nokia mobile phone. If you remember those, the days before iPhone, which is what we were using, even though it wasn't that long ago, but we were using that kind of phone. And I stood up and I walked over to the counter and poured myself a coffee. And in walks this man-mountain of a guy. And I'm using him, I'll call him John. I'm using him as the communicator because of the language barrier. And because if I'm a white, middle-aged, middle-class British guy, if I suddenly jump on the call with some kidnappers in West Africa, they're going to go, who's this dude? And it's going to raise the perceived value of the hostages. So I'm using this guy as a communicator, and I've spent the best part of a week coaching him, sitting down with him, working out what we're going to say, how we're going to structure each call, what's the outcome of each call, and our whole negotiation playbook. And he comes in and he's like, Mr. Scott, why do they not call? And I look at him because he's a man mountain, and I say that they'll call when they're ready. We must be patient. And then we go and sit back down, and it's as if the universe is listening. The phone rings. Wow. And everybody jumps, myself included, even though I've done it many, many times. And then I look at John, and he looks at me. He presses the green, the accept button. And He's like, hello, we have your people. We want $5 million or they die.
Wow.
And that's it. The line cuts out. And everyone's looking like you can hear a pin drop. I'm relieved that they phoned, that they made contact. We haven't got proof of life, but they made contact. And it's also this sense of excitement now of, right, we're on. This is it. Because it's always that not knowing. It's always that waiting game that's the difficult. It's the hardest part. Waiting is the hardest part of any negotiation. And then so over the course of the next couple of weeks, I work with John and we get them from 5 million down to $500,000, down to 500,000.
Wow.
I've come down a lot. And he's played an absolute blinder. But it's taking its toll on him. It really is. And he's a broken man. He hasn't shaved in days. He hasn't showered in longer. And I know this because I'm sat next to him for 16 hours a day. And he's a broken man. But he is the key to making this work. Because if he loses it, and I've been on cases where the communicator, the negotiator, has lost it with the kidnappers, and that's not ended well. But because I've spent the time building the trust with the kidnappers as well, they can wait. And I say to people, dealing with the kidnappers, just like dealing with your clients or your customers, that's the easy bit. The hard bit is what we call the crisis within the crisis, your own side. Because there's 3 parts to negotiation. There's your own emotional state, your mindset. There's the other side, about their mindset, their needs, beliefs, values, rules. What are they looking to get? As well as your own. And we often neglect our own side. And so we call the crisis within the crisis, and about 80% of my time on cases was spent dealing with the egos, the emotions, the internal politics of my own side. So in this case, I've realized that the kidnappers can wait. I've got 24, 36 hours probably before we need to get back to them. And I'm working with John. He's slowly getting there, and then the phone rings again. I'm thinking, oh, okay, we'll take the call. And he turns around and says, we need more time. This is a lot of money. This is all we've got. Please look after my friends. They're your responsibility. And then there's a pause, and the kidnappers go, no, they're yours. They're money by Friday, or we will kill them.
Wow.
And the line goes dead. And again, you can hear a pin drop. And then that is until John's fist comes smashing down on the wooden table. And I realize in that moment, that fist is going to come my way. And so he stands up and I stand up, and he turns and he walks out. And I'm thinking, right, I've got to get him round. I've got to use all the tools and techniques I can, all the empathy, the validating, making him feel seen, heard and understood, balancing out his autonomic nervous system, all of this good stuff. I need to focus on that and bring him round. And so 24 hours later, he's back where we need him, showered and shaved, and he's on point. Phone rings again, and we get a deal for 300,000 and the 6 hostages back. And everyone's thinking, great, it's all worked out. This is it, we're done. And I'm trying to remind people, just because you've got a deal, that's not it. An agreement is not the same as a safe and timely release. It's like in business or any aspect of your life. Just because you've got someone saying yes or an agreement, until that money's in your account or the product or service has been delivered or your kids have actually tidied their bedroom, whatever it is, you're not there. And so people take their foot off the gas and they go, tea and medals all around, but no. And so in this case, we bag up the money, and then we've got this plan about where we're going to find a courier who's going to take the money to the kidnappers. So we need to cross the border without getting seen and discovered by the authorities. And every 4 hours, he's supposed to check in. But 4 hours go by, nothing. 8 hours, 12 hours, nothing. And meanwhile, the kidnappers are thinking, what's happening? You're trying to rip us off. You're trying to ambush us. Right, we're going to harm the hostages here. This is it. We've kept our side of the bargain, and now you are looking to kind of shaft us. A bit later, we get a phone call. the courier's been intercepted and arrested by the local police, who got word of this. And they're refusing to let him go. So then we've got another negotiation to secure the release of the courier and the ransom money from some local chief of police who doesn't want to even speak to us. So we managed to find someone who's even more important than the chief of police to fly down, have the conversation, release the courier and the money, or most of the money, because you've got local taxes, obviously. And then we think, great, we can get the courier back on the road and pay the money. But he wants nothing to do with it. He's taking his cut and he legs it. So I'm thinking, right, I've got 6 hostages. I've got kidnappers who are just losing it, threatening to kill them. I've got a distraught family. I've got a company going, Scott, what is happening? It's a pretty bad day in the office, really. Wow. So managed to find another courier who takes the money, hires a boat, goes out to sea, is met by the kidnappers on another boat, hands the money over, they count it, hand the hostages back over. Now, that rarely happens. It's not like in the movies where there's a simultaneous exchange at dawn on the bridge with all the fog in the background lifting. It's not like that. It could be days or weeks before the hostages come back after you've paid the money.
Is that standard practice? You give the money first and then you wait for the... Wow,
because
all in good faith.
All in good faith. And I'll come on to that very point in a second about why it works. And then the kidnappers turn around and they'll say, what we're going to do, we're going to escort you back to safety. Just in case you get any patrols of the Navy or any of the criminal gangs, we don't want you to get into any more trouble. And not only that, here's a clean phone that if you do get into any trouble, give us a call and we'll come and help you out free of charge. I'm thinking that is great customer service.
Yeah.
Even Amazon doesn't do that. And so I learned a lot of things from that case. And probably the number one thing, which is the golden thread through all negotiations, and don't forget, a negotiation is simply a conversation with a purpose. So if you don't see yourself as a negotiator, that's not something you do. You're not in sales or business development or whatever. It doesn't matter. You're negotiating all day, every day. And for me, it showed me that trust is the number one success factor. And let's think about it. A kidnap for ransom negotiation, it's the most unregulated, ungoverned industry in the world. Most dangerous exchange you could ever make. If it could go wrong, it does go wrong. Yet there's a 93% chance of success every time. Because of trust.
Wow. I mean, it is a business, as you said, after all.
Kidnappers are businessmen who are looking to get a good deal. And I learned over the years developed an ability to be reasonable with unreasonable people.
And the same way that you're trusting them to return the hostages, they're trusting you to not go after them after the fact because they are criminals, right?
Absolutely. Particularly when I was in the police, that's a different story. We'd look to arrest them. But most of this that happened was when I left the police and I did in the private sector. And I'm not interested in going after the kidnappers. My sole aim is the safe and timely release of those hostages for an appropriate amount of money and to mitigate against any future kidnappings.
It's amazing. So their initial ask was $5 million. You got them down to $300,000. Wow. And the hostages were all returned safe and sound.
Safe and sound. Some of them had actually, I wouldn't say they thrived in the situation. That's probably a bit extreme. But they came out relatively unscathed. And that, again, that it highlighted to me that resilience, it's not something you just talk about and put a social media post out about it. It's not a strapline on a mug or a T-shirt. You have to do hard things. You have to be comfortable being uncomfortable. And you have to be able to understand that the only thing you can control is what happens inside your head. About how you interpret things, the meaning you give things. There's an element of acceptance and acknowledgement and a reframing of, okay, I'm going to get through this. And we saw this in hostages over many, many decades, from the Vietnam War in the 80s in the Middle East and stuff. And the ones who really came out of it relatively unscathed weren't the naive optimists, we'll be home by Christmas kind of approach. It was, you know what, this ain't good. And it might not end very well. However, whilst we're here, they can beat us, they can break our bones, they can torture us, but they're sure as heck not going to get inside my head. And they accepted that at some point they're likely to get released, but we just don't know when it is. And the prisoners, the hostages who had that mindset came out, and as I said, were relatively unscathed. The most famous one of all being Viktor Frankl, out of the Auschwitz concentration camps in the Second World War, who wrote a great book, Man's Search for Meaning, about how he observed all the people at the concentration camps, who were the ones that got through it and then went on to live a relatively quote-unquote normal, thriving life afterwards. And it was those who gave meaning to things, chose their meaning, and realized that you can control the controllables and nothing else.
Those are the rules of resilience.
100%.
Yeah. How do you look after yourself, your own, I guess self-care, if you will, in those moments where you're waiting for the call back, tensions are running through the roof? I would be a mess. I would be like losing sleep. It just seems like a major burden on mental health, if nothing else.
Well, there's two things there. The first of all, it was about, it's not what I think or what I feel. It's about how can I best support the family or the client? How can I best serve them right now to get their loved one back? Not that I was blind or ignored my own needs or wants or boundaries. It wasn't that at all. It was, this is not me. This is not the Scott Walker Show. This is me helping their family through the most insanely difficult period in their life. And what helped me actually apply that was something, I discovered just through practice, I guess, is observing but not absorbing. I can observe what goes on. I can take a slight step back. I can feel compassion. I can definitely empathize. And empathy, it's a doing word. You don't feel empathy necessarily. It's something that you do in terms of demonstrating your understanding of whether the person is at. I can do all of that without absorbing, without taking on the negativity, the pressure, the pain, the suffering of whomever it is.
Yeah. You leave work at the office.
Yeah. But that was but I learned that as a cop though. You're dealing with some horrendous situations. You normally see just the worst of humanity as well as the best at times, but you're really dealing with people in dire straits or really serious situations. And so again, I started developing that, I guess, the resilience muscle, as a cop, experiencing it on a daily basis. And then when I got into the kidnap negotiation world, it wasn't as if I was starting from scratch. I'd already had an element of, 16 years at that point. Plus I'd served time in the military. I'd been exposed to enough to know I'm not taking this on. I'm not allowing this to be absorbed into my own, emotional bandwidth, so to speak.
You've given us some really, I think, incredibly valuable tips for negotiation. The revelation that, when you're negotiating with somebody, it really is a dance with the other person's emotions. You really, it's letting them feel as though they've gotten a deal while you yourself are also getting a deal. And then starting with a low number so that you can arrive at something, reasonable. But any other maybe even counterintuitive expert level negotiation tactics, that you would say most people aren't privy to, because people today, whether buying homes or buying cars or whatever, negotiation is it's a fairly common aspect of day-to-day life, And so, yeah, what are some other, I guess, valuable tips that you would say most people aren't privy to, but that if they were, would improve their lives in a major way?
Well, there's a number of things there, really. First one is seek first to understand before being understood.
Seek first to understand
before being understood.
Wow.
And I know that's a great cliche that's been around for a long time, but it's so true. And it's not about you. If I want to sell you something, and I'm just thinking about, it's all about me, it's all about my commission. Actually, I might get a couple of deals, but if I want to be the best salesperson in the world, I need to find out what's making Max tick. What are his beliefs, his rules, his values? I can't influence you unless I already know what influences you. So I have to suspend my own ego. And we've all got an ego, let's not deny it. But you can have a healthy ego and you can have a not so healthy ego. So I need to suspend that to start with. I need to do my homework and prepare for, okay, what is really driving Max for this deal? What need is he looking to be met here? Which emotion is he looking to satisfy? Because if you want to drive around in a sports car or earn $1 million a year, it's not because you want a million pieces of paper with pictures of dead people on it or a lump of metal and rubber with a badge on it. You want the emotion that comes with that car.
Right.
It's why people in the height of recession will still spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on a car or tens of thousands on a handbag or on other luxury goods. It's the emotion that they get, the sense of maybe significance with that. Or it could be your need is to collaborate and serve other people. So I know that aesthetic, that sense of balance and harmony and teamwork is really driving you, which means I can maybe structure the negotiation a different way, as opposed to you just want the flashiest, most expensive thing because it ticks a certain box for you. And so it's doing your preparation, understanding, okay, what is the real need? What's the real driver here? And there's needs and wants. The kidnappers, they wanted $1 million and a plane out of the country. They're going to get neither. But what they do want to do, what they need to be able to walk away having got a decent enough deal for them so they can save face and not look like cowards or weak to their own people. Doesn't mean I condone or agree with them or let them get away with it. And so that's really, really important.
You can make them feel like the baddies that they want to feel like without giving them 100% of what they want.
Yeah, exactly. I don't want to be best friends with them. I'm not looking to go for a beer with them afterwards. I just want to I want them to say yes to a deal, agree to it, follow through without any drama. Because if I mess up, people die. So it focuses the mind a little bit. And the other thing is for people is don't rush to problem solve. We're in such a rush to resolve the solution, to come up with a solution. The problem with that is, unless, again, we've identified the emotions that are driving it. Because coming up with a solution to the problem and information gathering is only part of a negotiation. The other part, and in my opinion is the most important part, is building and developing relationships. Because you ultimately, we all want to, is bring about this long-term, lifelong collaboration or cooperation. If you've got a business, you want customers and clients coming to you to the end of time and to bring their friends and their friends to bring their friends because you've established trust. You see it as a relationship with them. They feel as if they're getting an insane amount of value. They feel as if you're going to do what you say you're going to do, as opposed to this is just some kind of transaction. And so these are some of the things that I really encourage people's time spent building the relationships, establishing trust, empathizing, building that rapport is time well spent.
Makes a ton of sense. How can you spot when somebody's lying, when somebody's not being completely forthcoming or maybe even not just explicitly not telling the truth?
Well, there's a couple of things here. There's one where they are just bone-faced lying, and it really deliberately lying to you. And then there's another where you can tell they're just stalling a bit. They just really don't want to say no, but they're not saying no. There's a slight difference there. And a lot of people, cops particularly, think they're really good at spotting liars, but we're not. And it's really difficult to, if there was 10 people lined up behind this table now and one of you was going to lie, it'd be very hard for anyone to pick out the liars amongst you. That's why game shows such as Traitors, I don't know if you get that over here, are really popular, because you're trying to spot the liars. And then people think, well, he folded his arms, or he twitched in a certain way, or he said that word. I'm thinking, without a baseline, you're going to struggle. But what you
need a baseline. That's very interesting.
You need a baseline. I need to know, under pressure, how does Max react? It's like poker. What are the tells? But you need to know what are you starting from, because you may just fold your arms, or we speak about James Bond earlier, like in Casino Royale, with Le Chiffre's his eyeball bleeds, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And that's a classic thing.
The weeping tear duct.
That's the one. So, but what you can do is you can ask questions. Because I'm constantly saying to people, we need to clarify and verify. Because on the first days I got taught my ABCs in negotiation. Assume nothing, believe no one, and clarify everything. And what that means is I'm going to assume nothing is as I think it is. I'm going to bring more curiosity than assumption to the negotiation. I'm not going to believe anyone or anything right now until I can get the proof of life. Just because you said you've got the hostages, I don't know. Just because you said you're good for this deal, for the mergers and acquisitions or the car, I don't know that yet. And I want to constantly clarify and verify everything. And so if I ask questions around, okay, some implementation questions perhaps. Okay, well, how's this going to play out? Talk me through the process. What happens next? I'm really trying to delve behind, okay, why is this important to you? You say this business deal is really important to you, Max. What would this mean for you? And then you can tell in their answer, actually, if it's just a bit wishy-washy, a bit vague, you can then just go a bit deeper. So asking lots of open questions can help elicit, again, what's really driving. And then you can go back and go, well, and then you can use a bit of summarizing or paraphrasing around, well, this sounds like it's a really important deal for you. And earlier you mentioned this, and this. And then you can keep introducing it at different stages of the negotiation, because once they're committed to something, they're unlikely to then be able to backtrack if they put themselves in a corner. And then you'll be able to see over time if, actually, are they lying? Are they telling the truth here? Are they consistent with their theme? Are they coming up with enough detail that you believe this negotiation is going to happen? But I found very rarely in a negotiation is somebody going to invest the time and effort over days or weeks just barefaced lying to you. Because you think, well, what's in it for them here? Why are they... Is it because they are lying around maybe the value of their product or service? But then again, just some curiosity. I always like to act dumb at times. I like things simple all the time. Make it as simple as possible, but no simpler, as the saying goes. And so I'm always asking almost these basic questions to kind of elicit that really strong foundation on which we can agree on, and then from that we can then slowly build the negotiation, the deal afterwards. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. And how important is learning to trust your gut? Like those gut level instincts and reactions.
Yeah, this is a hot topic really, isn't it? About do you go with reason and logic, or do you go with emotion and intuition? And I say you have to do both. We as a species, we can't rationalize and think through everything logically. We just don't have the time in the day. Our brains would be just so overworked, which is why we use intuition to make everyday choices. But it can make us lazy. And that's when we get, cognitive bias, confirmation bias all kick in. And so we have to be able to really tune into, okay, what is the emotion that's driving? What's my intuition here about Max, about this deal, about this relationship, about this hostage deal, whatever it is. But then how can I look at this logically? What's the rational perspective here? So the sweet spot is where you merge both of them together. So you can your intuition matches the logic. But be mindful that we make decisions emotionally and then we look to justify them rationally afterwards. I know Daniel Kahneman, who's sadly no longer with us, he was saying actually what he likes to do is come up with a rational argument first and then look for the intuition afterwards. But like anything, it requires practice, it requires effort to work that muscle about, okay, can I really trust my gut? And just because it's worked for 100 times, does it mean it's going to work for the 101st time? Which is why I was saying at the beginning about I need to establish that credibility with the family. But I'm not naive enough to know that it's not always going to work like that. And which is why I'd always encourage everyone else around the table to come out with their opinions, their thoughts, their viewpoints, and to test it.
Do you play poker?
No.
You don't play poker?
I don't play. I should do maybe.
I feel like you'd kill.
Well, I've just been in Vegas, so...
you were just there.
I was just there, yeah.
Yeah. I learned to play poker during the pandemic, and it's been so fun. It's been such a cool skill to have acquired because I can play anywhere in the world now. Everybody loves poker. It's so fun. But it is interesting. It's a game where you're playing the person across from you. You're not playing against the casino, unlike blackjack and all those other games. It is kind of an interesting study in learning nonverbal cues and it's very interesting. And of course, it's a game. It's James Bond, famously big poker player, which I think, like, as a detective, you might have an upper hand that you're not exploiting.
Maybe. Hey, this is notes to self.
Yeah,
I'm going to go away and maybe do a crash course in how to kick someone's butt at poker.
Yeah, it's a fun game. What was it like being a policeman in London? What was that experience like?
Yeah, I loved it. I literally loved every single day. I thought, here I am. I get paid to give people a voice. The people who didn't have a voice, the victims, their families. And almost, well, no, I did. I felt as if I could help them and, as I said, be their voice, champion them, help them get justice by tracking down and putting before the courts the perpetrators who would do things to them or to their property and stuff. And yeah, it was just a great career, and I just went all over the world with it. I met some great people, and then I turned 40, and I thought, you know what, I want a second career. And what I didn't want to end up was in my 50s as some bitter, cynical, old sweat cop who hates the world. And I'd pretty much done everything I wanted to do by that point. I spent time in counterterrorism and intelligence and organised crime and then kidnapping. So I'd done everything I'd set out to do pretty much. And I wanted to be young enough to go and get a second career, which I did do. And now as a writer and as a speaker, I've got a third career essentially. Amazing.
James Bond, obviously, he's a member of the MI6, which is the Secret Intelligence Service. Is there any similarity between, how those intelligence ops are portrayed in the movies versus how they are in real life?
I think you're asking the wrong person.
Yeah.
I don't know. I've no idea whether or not they're accurate or not. I sense from, knowing a few people in that world and elsewhere that it's not always as it's portrayed. Just like you're portrayed in the movies, just like with kidnapping. Most people watch a movie and they think it's a bit like Denzel Washington or Man on Fire or, whichever movies of your choice. I mean, the one movie that is reasonably accurate is Proof of Life with Russell Crowe and Meg Ryan. In terms of The guy goes in. There's lots of people on the periphery all looking to get a quick buck out of this. And he has to have some difficult conversations. He has to be really resilient, really strong, have a bit of conflict. But then that's where it ends. I mean, having an affair with the hostage's wife and getting in helicopter gunships isn't like real life. But other than that, that's reasonably accurate.
Reasonably accurate. Yeah, I guess for a Hollywood film, that's the most we could hope for. But that's cool. I'll have to check that out. How does stress affect decision making? Like when you're in one of those super heated moments, how do we de-escalate cortisol to make better and more rational decisions? Which is something, by the way, that I think is probably broadly applicable to people, that are stressed out and needing to make sound decisions. Yeah,
your nervous system is your nervous system, irrespective of what triggers the stress or not in you. Again, I learned this just by practicing over the years, was coming up with a 3-step process to manage that, called the immediate action drill. And I still use it to this day, and it can be used proactively before an important conversation, a meeting, a talk, a negotiation, or in the midst of something, you've been hit by the overwhelm of a trigger. Somebody's cut you up in traffic, or somebody said something to you that you don't quite like, and you've taken offense to it. And the first step is around interrupting the pattern, because otherwise I could be sat here doom scrolling or cogitating over what that person said, and all I'm going to do is spiral downwards. So I need to interrupt that pattern. Once I've done that, and that can mean I can maybe do some breathing exercises, some box breathing, for example, which I used to do a lot of, and actually still do when I need to. And that's one way of balancing the nervous system really, really quickly. And the second step is about riding the wave. Riding the wave, you have about 90 seconds or 2 minutes for when you get that trigger, when you get that stimulus, when the cortisol kicks in, for it to flush through your body. 90 seconds, 2 minutes. And if you're still feeling it after that, which most people are, all it means is that you're pressing repeat on the story inside your head, looking to justify, name, blame, and shame as to why you're feeling that. And so what I've learned to do is feel the feeling, but drop the story. So as you're riding that wave of cortisol for 90 seconds, 2 minutes, rather than saying or doing something, which is where most of us will say and do things we later regret.
Yeah, that's where most of us screw up. We react.
Absolutely. So for those 90 seconds, ride the wave, feel the feeling, but drop the story. So it could be, do you know what? I'm feeling an irritability or a tension in my back or stomach or somewhere. Just notice it. Just be aware. Just be truly present. And then after a couple of minutes, you've done your breathing. You've interrupted the pattern. You've done some breathing. You've felt the feeling, but dropped the story. And the final part, the third part, is ask some better questions. Right, what was all that about? What am I not seeing here? What do I need to know? What else am I missing here? What's the opportunity? What's the gift? Who else can help me? How can I help this person? Questions which, if you ask them when you get that stimulus, when you get that trigger, you're like, I don't care what they think. All I know is they've done this and they shouldn't have done it. And I'm now blaming them, and I'm right, they're wrong, and I'm going to prove that. But if you can go through that process, that 3-step process of interrupt the pattern, ride the wave, and ask better questions, you come out the other side thinking, all right, okay, I can look at this situation better. I can look at it differently. And so that's helped me, along with, just building a battle rhythm. I talk about it in the book, whereas you've got to be able to put some boundaries in, which is why on a kidnapping, we would have call windows. We would only speak to the kidnappers between a certain period of time. The rest of the time, that phone would be off. So it meant we could sleep, we could exercise, we could strategize about how we were going to negotiate moving forward. Iron out any problems with couriers or chiefs of police. And so that battle rhythm, you could apply this to your life in any way, it just means you're sustainable for the long term. It means you're not going to get burnt out. It means you can focus on the stuff that matters. And by doing that, by just, prioritizing sleep where you can, all the basics that we hear about, have worked for me for sure.
Yeah, I mean, when that stressful stimulus comes in, it's like it activates that fight or flight response. And yeah, I find that it's exactly as you're saying. I think, putting space in between the stimulus and the response, like I've never regretted waiting for more information. I've certainly regretted acting emotionally on a stressful stimulus.
I don't think anybody looks back once they've shouted at their kids, a few hours later thinking, I'm so proud of myself for that reaction. That's exactly what that child needed. I don't think it is really. And I've been guilty of it just like the next parent. Or it's something that you say to your significant other. When you haven't ridden that wave long enough and you've said something that rarely do you go back and go, that was my finest moment. So if you can, between the stimulus and your response, because you want to respond proactively and consciously, as opposed to some kind of knee-jerk emotional reaction.
Yeah.
And just to clarify, it's not about being like Dr. Spock, some kind of cyborg without any emotions. We're not talking about that. I still get annoyed, frustrated, angry, whatever, but I just don't allow it to consume me. I just notice it, acknowledge it, maybe focus on my breath for a few seconds, ride the wave and go, right, where's that come from? What's that telling me? Okay, what do I need to find out more information? Why has that triggered me the way it has done? And this stuff is so simple, but not so easy to apply.
No.
And it's like anything, though. You've got to practice. And I just encourage anyone who's listening or watching to this, is that any of the techniques you pick up from this or from the book or elsewhere is, everything's a Google click away. Knowledge isn't the issue here. You can find out online or from any book how to get the body of a Mr. or Mrs. Olympia, $1 million, and the partner of your dreams. So why aren't we all living those kind of lives that we want? It's because we get in our own way and we're not consistently applying the knowledge. We're allowing our emotions and our negative, disempowering thought patterns to get in the way that sabotage. And as I said at the beginning, a negotiation is simply a conversation with a purpose. And the most important negotiation you'll have is with yourself.
It reminds me of all those times I've come up with the clever comeback that I wish I said in the heat of the moment the next day, or while I'm like, my head is against the pillow and I'm like trying to go to sleep at night, That's when the clever, creative comeback hits me. It's never in the heat of the moment, because you're only thinking with your reptile amygdala activated in those stressful moments, It's just it always benefits you to put a beat there. And I think like breath work, as you mentioned, like breathing exercises, meditation. I'm not like a practicing meditator or anything, but I feel like that's kind of what the promise of those modalities offers.
Yeah, and people say meditation and it can attract some people and it can put a lot of people off. But let's just look at what it really is trying to get you to do. It's just trying to get you to pause, even if it's for a few seconds, and look to expand your focus and awareness. That's it. If I can sit there on the train, on the plane, recording this podcast, and just become really present and not worry about emails I've got to answer or where I've got to go after this or the flight I've got to get here. It's just try and be present and just notice what's going on. And very rarely do we spend even 30 seconds a day without any kind of stimulus coming in, any kind of input. We've always got something to do, emails to answer, Slack messages to respond to. But just by sitting there and just noticing, that can really, really help.
Yeah. Did they teach you all this in the force?
Nope.
No.
I mean, this is something I've, again, discovered out of necessity from bouncing from hundreds of cases really, and just build up over the years. And as I was saying earlier, I didn't know the science or the neuroscience behind any of this when I was doing it really. It's only towards the tail end of it and when I left that I suddenly was curious as to why did I notice so many similar patterns of what works and what doesn't, and how people think, feel and act in times of stress and overwhelm and uncertainty and crisis and conflict, a bit like the world we're seeing right now. And how can we have better conversations? And then I was looking at what was the science behind it, and then discovered actually that this stuff, it's not just me making it up, this stuff actually exists. And now I know the reason why these things are effective, no matter where you are in the world, no matter what culture, industry, sector, age, language, religion or non, it doesn't matter. We're human beings and we all respond very, very similarly.
I love that. Well, dude, this was so interesting. Loved getting to know you. Where can people that are listening pick up your book, which I'm super excited for, and where can they find you on social media?
Yeah, the book is available wherever books are sold, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, the usual places. People can go to my website, scottwalkerbooks.co.uk. I'm heavily active on LinkedIn or on Instagram as well. And in the book, basically, I've just taken all the years of experience, and it's a really practical tools and techniques about things people can apply to their day-to-day life, regardless of what you do, underpinned by some good case stories and case studies that highlight all the key points.
Super exciting. Yeah, man. Well, thanks for doing what you do. This is fascinating. And I've got one last question for you. What does living a genius life mean to you?
Living a genius life to me means passing the mirror never lies test. Which is the mirror never lies test. Is something I came up with that you can BS everybody around you all day long. But when you look in the mirror at night and you go, did I give everything I could to this? Did I show up with the right intention? Did I approach that conversation properly? Did I do everything I could? Did I leave everything possible on the field there? Or did I phone it in today? Did I have a bit of a Machiavellian intent there, or whatever it is? And only you know if you've passed that test. And it's not about looking for perfection or even judging yourself. It's just on a daily basis being able to check in with yourself and go, yeah, I've done the best I could possibly do today.
I love that. Dude, well, thanks so much for coming in.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Hey, if you liked that video, you need to check out this one here, and I'll see you there.